They returned. Daniel and Holloway emerged from the ruined basement, stepping onto the desolate streets of Portland. The blue sky had returned, but neither of them felt any relief. There were no car horns, no pedestrians, just a deathly silence enveloping everything. "Why is the city so quiet?" Daniel asked, his voice hoarse. Holloway scanned the street. The windows of the high-rise buildings were still open, cars were abandoned in the middle of the road, but there was no one in sight. "We need to find out what happened," Holloway said, drawing his gun. The two of them headed toward the city center, where evacuation efforts had once been concentrated. When they reached Pioneer Square, a horrifying sight greeted them. Hundreds of discarded clothes lay scattered on the ground, but there was no sign of any people. Daniel swallowed hard. What the hell happened to them? Holloway bent down and picked up a phone with its screen still on. The last message read, "They're coming. No one can escape." Suddenly, a hiss echoed from the alley to their left. Daniel and Holloway spun around. Shadows were crawling out from the walls. "The formless creatures." "Run!" Holloway shouted. The two of them dashed into an abandoned store, slamming the door shut just as something heavy slammed against it. Daniel peeked through the crack, his heart nearly stopping. A tall, shapeless entity, its form blurry like mist, was slithering down the street. I had no face, only black tendrils constantly reaching out, searching for prey. "They're still here," Daniel whispered. "We closed the gate, but they're still here." Holloway gritted his teeth. "Or worse, they've found a way to stay." Suddenly, a sound came from the upper floor of the store. Someone else was alive. Daniel signaled to Holloway, and the two of them slowly climbed the stairs, weapons ready. The door at the top trembled slightly, as if someone was leaning against it. "Is someone in there?" Daniel asked softly. No answer, only heavy breathing. Daniel exchanged a glance with Holloway, then slowly pushed the door open. Inside was a woman with panicked eyes, her hands trembling as she held a knife. "Don't come closer," she screamed. Daniel raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Calm down. We're not your enemies." The woman stared at them for a long moment before dropping the knife. You're not them." "Who are you?" Holloway asked. "My name is Rachel," she replied, her voice breaking. "I'm one of the few left. They took everyone else." "Who are they?" Daniel asked. Rachel swallowed. "I don't know. They appeared right after the explosion. Anyone they touched disappeared. No bodies, no traces. Just their clothes." Daniel glanced at Holloway. "Like what we saw out there?" Rachel nodded. "I've been hiding here for 3 days. I thought I was the only one left." "You're not," Holloway said firmly. "We'll find a way to end this." Rachel gave a weak smile. "You think you can fight something you can't even see clearly?" Daniel clenched his fists. "We'll find a way." As night fell, the entities outside became more active. Whispers echoed everywhere, as if the darkness was mocking them. Rachel shivered. "They always get worse at night." Daniel looked out the window. "They're waiting for something." Suddenly, Holloway grabbed Daniel's arm, pointing into the distance. At the center of the city, atop the tallest building, another gate was slowly opening. This time, no one could close it so easily. The sky above Portland was torn apart by streaks of red light. The tower at the city center, where the hellish gate was opening, shook violently. Shadowy entities poured out, engulfing everything around them. The ground trembled, buildings cracked, signaling the end of the human world. Daniel, Holloway, and Rachel ran through the ruined streets, dodging the black tendrils reaching out for prey. The eerie whispers echoed everywhere, seeping into their minds, trying to drown their will to fight. "We have to reach that tower," Daniel shouted, gripping his gun tightly. "If we don't close that gate now, the whole world will disappear." Rachel replied, her hands trembling but still clutching the only silver knife that could kill these entities. Their hurried footsteps echoed on the cracked pavement. Around them, the darkness was spreading, swallowing every trace of life. They couldn't afford to delay. Inside the tower, the gate stood wide open, and a massive entity loomed within the black smoke. It was no longer a nameless creature. It had a form. It had consciousness. Its glowing red eyes bore into their minds, creating an overwhelming sense of despair. "You think you can stop me?" Its deep voice resonated, as if coming from the darkness itself. Holloway raised his gun, but Daniel stopped him. "It's useless. We need to close the gate first." Rachel stepped forward, her hands trembling as she held the knife. "We have to push it back and seal the gate. This is our only chance." The darkness surged like a tidal wave. Tendrils lashed out, engulfing everything. Daniel pushed Rachel aside, drew the sword he had taken from the basement earlier, and slashed at one of the black tendrils. A horrifying screech echoed, shaking the ground. Holloway threw a flash grenade, causing the creatures to recoil. Hurry! Rachel seized the moment, lunging forward and plunging the knife into the heart of the darkness. The creature screamed, black smoke billowing out, swirling violently. The gate behind it began to shake. "We're almost there," Daniel shouted, continuing to push the entity back. Just one more step. But a burst of black light engulfed Rachel. She was lifted into the air, her body crushed by the dark energy. "Rachel!" Daniel screamed, but Holloway held him back. Rachel smiled sadly. "Go. Close the gate." She pulled the knife out of the entity and stabbed deeper. A massive explosion erupted, tearing the darkness apart. Rachel's body glowed brightly like a torch before vanishing into the void. Daniel and Holloway had no other choice. Together, they closed the gate as the darkness was sucked back in. The pull was so strong that they were almost dragged in. Daniel used all his strength, using the sword to block the gap, creating enough pressure to push it back into place. A blinding light flashed. The gate was closed. When Daniel opened his eyes, the sky had returned to normal. The streets were silent. The entities were gone. But Rachel was gone too. Holloway sat down, panting. "Did we win?" Daniel didn't answer. He looked up at the sky, where the gate had been. A gentle breeze passed by, carrying the echo of a familiar voice. Rachel had sacrificed herself. Holloway placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "She saved the world." Daniel clenched his fists. He turned and walked away, his figure blending into the city lights. 3 days later, Portland remained in ruins. The government had sent troops to restore order, but what had been lost would never return. Daniel sat in a ruined cafe, watching the news on a cracked screen. No one outside their group knew what had really happened. The public was told it was a bizarre natural event. Every trace of the shadowy creatures had been erased. Holloway walked over, placing a cup of coffee in front of Daniel. "We stopped it, but who knows if it's really over." Daniel looked out the window. In a dark corner, among the ruined buildings, a shadow flickered. He wasn't sure if the gate was truly closed forever. The returned might have to come back once more.